Hi friends, Caitlin here with Sass and Stitch Crochet, and today I'll be walking you through a tutorial for the Symsonia Earwarmer. This is an earwarmer that is worked in short rows for the length of the earwarmer, which will end up being the circumference of your head. And then once we work our long flat rectangle, we will sew up the ends to make this beautiful twist detail. I'll be displaying the adult size on the video, but if you head to the link in the description box below, there's a blog post that has sizes from toddler all the way through adult. So if you're looking for a different size, you can go ahead and check that out once you've watched the video. So for this earwarmer, you are going to need bulky weight yarn. This is a category 5 weight yarn. For this video, I'm using my own personal hand-dyed yarn from Sass and Stitch Fibers. But you can use any hand-dyed yarn, any bulky weight yarn you find at the store. I will give you a couple of ideas right here in this graphic. You will need about 70 yards of bulky weight yarn for the adult size. You'll also need a 6mm crochet hook. You'll need a flexible tape measure. And you will also need a yarn needle to weave in your ends at the end of your work. And you'll need a pair of scissors. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we'll be starting by making a slip knot. This is how I like to make my slip knots. I'm going to put the tail of my yarn up towards my working area. I'm going to take my index finger and put it under my yarn tail. Then I'm going to wrap my yarn tail around once and a half time down. I'll hold my 2 strands here. Then I'll pull the back loop to the front of my finger. Then I'll pull this back loop completely off my finger and pull tight. And that's how you make a slip knot. The slip knot can adjust in size so that when you insert your crochet hook, you can just tighten it right up onto your hook. You don't want to make it too tight that your work can't slide around, but just tight enough. Okay, so we'll be starting our foundation chain. For this stitch pattern, you can chain any number of chains. What we want to do is to try and achieve a width of our earwarmer of about 4 inches wide. So you'll see here mine is 4 inches wide. So I'm not going to give you an exact gauge because sometimes beating gauge can just be more frustrating than just diving in and getting started. And because this is an earwarmer, gauge is not too important. So let's go ahead and start by chaining 10. So once we've worked our first row, you can measure and then you can go back and adjust if needed. Okay, so let's start by chaining 10. To make a chain, we're going to take our working yarn, which is in my left hand, not the tail here. We'll take it from back, up and around to the front. And we'll pull this loop through the first loop on our hook. That is 1 chain. Again, from back up all the way to the front and pull through the loop on our hook. That's 2. One more time together. Bring it all the way around to the front and pull through that loop on your hook. That's 3. You can see here we've got some V's here. Got 2 sides to each V. Each of these V's is 1 chain. So we've got our slip knot right here at the very bottom. We've got 1 V here, that's 1 chain. This is number 2, and this is number 3. The loop on our hook does not count as a chain. So we've got 3 chains so far. We're going to do a total of 10 chains. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is our foundation chain, which is going to help establish our width. Now the reason I don't tell you to measure your width and adjust now is because the actual width of your work is not going to be determined until you've worked at least the first row. Your chain is not reliable for measuring your final width of your project. So let's go ahead and work the first row and then we will measure our width at the end. So the stitch we're going to be doing is called a wide half double crochet cluster, which is just a variation of the half double crochet stitch. Now that is complete gibberish if you are a beginner crocheter, so you can just ignore everything that I just said and just watch the video and you'll learn how to do the stitch. But for those that are curious, that is what the name of this stitch is called. So we're going to be starting in the 3rd chain from the hook. So just a reminder, the loop on your hook does not count as a chain. This is the 1st chain, 2nd chain, 3rd chain. We're going to be starting in this 3rd chain from the hook. Now sometimes a pattern will tell you to flip over and work in the back bumps of the chain. This is not necessary, so we're just going to keep looking at the front view of the chain because I think that's a little bit easier for beginners. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to be working into this 3rd chain here. Now what we're going to do first is we're going to do another yarn over and then locate that 3rd chain again, and I want you to insert into just one of the top loops of that chain. Now we have 3 loops on our hook. You're going to yarn over again, so your strand is already kind of at the back of your work, so all you have to do is just bring it from the back to the front. Go ahead and grab this loop and we're going to pull it just through one loop on our hook. Now we're going to yarn over again, insert into that same chain again. So this is the chain we're coming out from. If you pull on your work, you'll notice there's a big hole forming. That's where you want to put your hook again. And I tend to keep my finger on my work so I don't lose it when I'm inserting. Insert, yarn over, and pull through just one. Now scoot your hook back down. And at this point we should have 5 loops on our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to yarn over and we're going to grab this and pull it through all of the loops on our hook. So the tip I have for this is once you catch that loop, once you start pulling your hook down and catch that loop, I want you to rotate the head of your hook down. So instead of pulling through the side, you're just going to end up catching all those loops. I want you to rotate down so that you can easily sneak through the bottom gaps of all of these loops. Sometimes it still takes a little finagling. If you need to just pull through one at a time, that's fine. But just remember, you're not doing any other yarn overs. You're just sneaking through all of those loops and then scoot your hook back up. Okay, that was a lot. Let's go over that again. So this big hole right here, we just worked into this big hole. Now we need to move over into the next chain. We've completely worked this stitch. We're going to work on the next stitch now. So we start that stitch with a yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over and pull through one, yarn over, insert into the same chain. So now we do work into this big hole here, yarn over and pull through one. Now we've got 5 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on our hook. Remember, turn the head of your hook down so it can sneak through. Sometimes you have to wiggle it a little bit. All 5 loops on our hook. That's the second stitch. So you'll see here we've got this stack of loops here. That's 1 stitch, 2 stitch, and eventually in the subsequent rows we'll be making this stitch texture. So I promise it will all make sense after a couple more rows. Okay, let's go through that again together. It's quite a bit to keep track of. Okay, working into the next chain. We've just worked into this big hole spot here. And you'll notice, so remember when we were in the first stitch and I was telling you that the first stitch had a big hole. Now that we worked the subsequent stitch, this big hole has closed up. So as we continue to work stitches, the hole previously will close back up and will not be big and chunky and gappy like this, I promise. So working into the next chain here, we start with a yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over, and pull through just one. You always scoot your hook back up after you've done a pull through. Again, we're going to yarn over, insert into the same chain, yarn over, which sometimes this yarn over isn't really a full yarn over because you're already kind of crossed over. You're just placing it over your hook so that you have something to grab onto. Pull through one, so you have 5 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through all 5 loops on your hook. Okay, let's do that together one more time. We're going to be working into the next chain, yarn over, insert into that next chain, yarn over and pull through one, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain, yarn over and pull through one. You should now have 5 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. Okay, keep repeating this stitch all the way across your chain. By the end, you should have done 8 stitches. Once we get to the end, I will pause and I will help you count your stitches. Okay, I just have one more stitch left to work here at the end. This is my slip knot. I've got one more chain here. So I'll work my last stitch of this row. And there we go. We've got the first row. So now, how to count your stitches. So the loop on your hook does not count as a stitch. I like to always start directly after my hook. So this is the loop on my hook. That does not count. This is 1. See how we have these double V's from the top view here? I personally think it's always easier to count the stitches from the top view. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you see this set of V's here. This is from the couple of chains that we skipped at the beginning. Once it starts veering off to the side, that's where it doesn't count as a stitch anymore. But as long as it's on the top view, that counts as a stitch. So we have 8 stitches across. Now is when you can go ahead and take a measurement. You want to lay your work flat down. So you want to measure from the very tip of this end stitch to the very tip of the other side of your work. And I'm sitting at almost 4 inches. I could add one more stitch, but I think I'm going to be okay with where I'm at. So you want to kind of aim for anywhere between 3.75 inches and 4.25 inches. That's going to be your sweet spot there. So if you have not made that mark, what you can do is just pull out your work, and you need to pull all the way back to the starting chain. So pull slowly until you've pulled out your last stitch. This is my chain here, the start of my starting chain. So I had started with 10 chains. So if I need to add more, I'll just put my hook in and work another chain. Or if I need to take away some chains, I can just simply pull out the number that I need to pull. Okay, so go ahead and do any adjustments you need to your starting chain, and then go ahead and work the first row again. Remember, when you're starting the first row, you start in the 3rd chain from the hook, so you'll skip the first 2. So I'm going to rework my first row, and I will meet you back at the end of the first row again. Okay, so now we're ready to start row 2, and the row 2 instructions are going to be repeated for the entire length of your ear warmer. Okay, so at the end of the row, you're going to chain 2. So yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook, that's a 1 chain. Yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook, that's 2 chains. Then we're going to flip our work over so that we're starting from the beginning side again. Now, usually in crochet, if you're experienced, you know that you usually work into the top loops of your stitches. You usually go along and you insert your hook into these top loops. But this time we're going to do something a little bit different with this stitch. We're going to be working in between stitches. So we're going to be pulling the stitches apart to find the gap in between the stitches all the way down here. So here is the first stitch, this is the second stitch. We just want to pull until we find that obvious gap here. There's going to be kind of a gap here where you have the top 2 loops and then this third additional loop. We don't want to go into there. We want to work completely in between these 2 stitches down here. So we are going to yarn over, insert into that hole, yarn over and pull through the hole, otherwise known as pull through 1. Again, insert, or yarn over, insert into that same hole, yarn over and pull through the hole. So we've got 5 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 5 loops. This is exactly what we did on the first row, but we're just working into these holes instead of working into the chains. So let's do that again together. We're going to look for the next space. Just pull apart the next 2 stitches and you'll find that hole to work into. Yarn over, insert into the next hole, yarn over and pull through the hole, yarn over, insert into the same hole, yarn over and pull through the hole, yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on your hook. You're going to continue this all the way across until the very end. Now at the end, you have your last 2 stitches here, but then after this last stitch, you have these chain 2s that you skipped at the beginning of the previous row. You're going to have a small hole right after this last stitch and in between this end chain here. So you want to pull that apart at the very end, and that's where stitch number 8 is going to go. So I'll work until the end and we'll do that last stitch together. Okay, so I've got one last stitch to work, but I want to pause here for a moment because sometimes it can be really easy to miss that last stitch, and I want you to know that you can always count your work to make sure that you've done the right number of stitches for that row. So if you did the same amount of chains that I did, which was a starting chain of 10, and you had 8 stitches on the last row, you'll always have 8 stitches in every single row. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to count just to confirm that I'm on the right track. Again, we don't count the loop that was on our hook. Count starting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This big clump right here is number 7, and then these 2 small little V's are part of that starting chain 2, so we don't count that. So I have 7 stitches. I need 8, so that means I have not worked that last one yet. You should always work one more after this big clump at the end. So we're going to pull apart and work our last stitch. And there we have it. Okay, so like I said earlier, we're going to be repeating row 2 for the entire length of our ear warmer. So let's walk through how to get started on this one more time together. At the end of a row, you're always going to chain 2, 1, 2, turn your work, and then you can get started with that same stitch in between the first 2 clumps. So let's go ahead and work one of those stitches together. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through all 5. Again, finding the next hole between these 2 clumpy stitches. We'll work our next stitch, and we'll continue working this all the way across, and especially not forgetting the one at the very end right after the last clumpy stitch here. So you're going to continue repeating row 2 for every single row from here on out. Now, how do I know how long to make my ear warmer? So what I want you to do is to grab your flexible tape measure, and I want you to measure the circumference of your head of where you would wear your ear warmer. I'm measuring about 21.5. Most adults will probably range somewhere between 20 and 24. So what you want to do is you want to crochet your work until you have a length that is 1.5 inches less than your head circumference. You don't want it to be your exact head circumference because this is going to stretch and it's going to stretch around your head to fit snugly. Not too snug. It's going to be the perfect amount of snug. So for an adult, for child sizes, it's going to be a different amount. So again, I want you to check that blog post for my recommendation. But if you're an adult, then if my head circumference is 21.5 inches, I'm going to work my length until I reach 20 inches long. And then I'm going to come back to this video and I will learn how to seam up the two sides together to form this twist. So continue working until you reach your desired length, and I will meet you back here to finish off your ear warmer. Okay, so I have now completed the length of my ear warmer, and at this point you can wrap it around your head and test if it's going to be the right size. You want to give it a little bit of stretch, and then you want it to have a little bit of extra room to account for, probably like this much overlap, because when we make the twist, you're going to lose a little bit of your length. So now would be a good time to go ahead and do a mock test. And if you can't get this much overlap, even with a little bit of stretching, then I would recommend adding some more rows. Or if you have too much overlap or too much stretch, you can take away a couple rows. But now we're ready to go ahead and make the twist of our ear warmer to finish it off. So go ahead and lay your ear warmer just flat down in your workspace in front of you, and we're going to take the bottom of our ear warmer and we're going to lay it over top to where half of each side is overlapping each other. So it doesn't have to be precise, but you see we've got about half of this side overlapping and half is left over here, and same for the other side. Now the bottom layer I'm going to fold in half over top, and then the other half I'm going to fold back to the back side so that you have this big cluster of two U shapes here. We have 4 layers to work through. Alright, so then carefully orient yourself so that you have your open loop on your working side. So if you're right-handed, you want it somewhere on your right side. Left-handed on your left side. It doesn't matter if it's ended up somewhere in the middle of the loop, on the back, or on the front. As long as it's on your right side, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so you can go ahead and insert your hook back into your working loop and go ahead and chain 1. Now we're going to be slip stitching through all 4 layers at once. So this is a little bit tricky, and it's also a little bit ambiguous. There's not an exact place that you're going to be inserting your hook because it's just not that precise. Basically what you want to do is start on the front layer towards you, and you're just going to find one of the loops on the very end. So for me this happens to be a curve on my first layer. I don't want to go right on the curve, I'm going to go to the front of the curve. As long as you're picking up at least one of these loops on each layer, then that's all you need to do. So now looking at my next layer, I need to grab one of these stitches, just kind of straight back if you can. My third layer, which happens to be the same on the same U shape as the front one here. You might have to pull it apart a little bit, and you want to find one right on the end. And then the last layer. Okay, so I've got all 4 layers on my hook at the same time. I'm going to yarn over, so my yarn is kind of already over to the front, crossing over my hook, so that counts as a yarn over. I'm going to pull this loop, this yarn over through all 4 layers. It's going to take a little bit of finagling. You might have to just kind of pull through one layer at a time until you find your way through. Now I have 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to just pull this front loop through the back loop. You might have to do some twisting of your crochet hook to get it through. So that's called a slip stitch. Now this is a little bit weird application of a slip stitch. Normally you're not pulling through a bunch of these layers. Okay, now we're going to locate it's easiest to look on the front layer here. We're going to go to the next stitch over, and we're going to insert through, and again we're going to be picking up each layer. So now you kind of want to look through and try to determine where you've just gone through. So it looks like on my previous layer I've got this cross bar here. That was that slip stitch getting pulled through. I've already gone into this stitch, so I'm going to go into this next stitch. That's 2 layers, 3, 4. Okay, yarn over, and you're going to pull through everything on your hook, including that last loop. So pull through, do some twisting, and that last loop on my hook. And when you come through, your loop on your hook is going to be pretty tight. You want to just lift that up to just give it a little bit of room to breathe again once you've made it all the way through. So you'll keep working across. For the adult size like we're doing here, you're going to be working through 3 to 4 times. So we've already done 2 times. I've got 1 to 2 more. I think I'm going to have a solid 2 more times. But the most important thing is that you're working through all of the layers each time you do it. On the very last one, I might not work through this inside 3rd layer if I've run out of stitches, but as long as I've worked to the end of that 3rd layer at some point in my next stitch, then that'll be okay. If you're making a smaller size, like a child size, you might only have to do this 2 to 3 times. So just, there's not an exact amount of times that you're going to do this across. As long as you're making it to the end of each layer at around the same time, that's all that matters. Okay, so my next one, I've just worked into here, so I'm going to work into here now. And I definitely have the space to do 1 more stitch after this, so I will end up doing 4. Okay, work into the 2nd layer, the 3rd layer, and the 4th layer. I'm going to yarn over, pull through everything on my hook, including that last loop. Give some room to breathe, and I'm going to do my last stitch. So you want to make sure your last stitch is on the very end of each of the layers if you can. 1, 2. Sometimes that inside layer is a little bit hard to dig out. You want to make sure you're grabbing that 3 and 4, and that's perfect. That puts me right at the very end of all 4 of my layers. So now I will yarn over, pull through everything on my hook. This one's a little bit tricky, so I need to pull apart my layers as I'm working. Sometimes it's hard to tell, okay, what loop am I pulling through? It's always the loop closest to the head of your hook. That's your active one that you're trying to pull through everything else. Okay, there we go. Okay, now you're going to chain 1, and don't fasten off just yet. Go ahead and just pull out your loop a little, or enough, so that when you try on your ear warmer, you're not going to pull out any of your stitches. So just give yourself a big loop so that your stitches don't get pulled out. And now you can open up your ear warmer, and you're going to flip it right side out. And okay, I've got a yarn tail here, but ignoring that. Now you have your ear warmer. It should look something like this, where you've got your 2 sides twisted into each other. Now is the time where you want to do your final try on. This needs to fit exactly how you want your intended ear warmer to fit. So go ahead and try it on. And it should just fit nice and snug. If it's too loose, like it's falling off your head, then you've got too many stitches. And if it's too tight that you have to stretch it too much, then you need to add some more rows. So if you decide that you are unhappy and you need to go back and add or take away some rows, all you have to do is just start pulling on your yarn and pull out until you get to a flat rectangle again, and then you can add or take away rows. But if you're happy with what you've got, then we can go ahead and fasten off. So you want to leave a long enough tail that you can weave in. So between this loop and here, I can probably cut off there, and I'm going to pull my yarn tail through so that I just have a straight tail instead of a loop. Okay, and now we need to just weave in our ends. So if you're not familiar with weaving in ends, I'll give you a quick tutorial. You want to take a yarn needle like this, thread your yarn through the loop, and then you're going to be just basically hiding your tail into your work. So you want to start near the base of the tail, and you want to just work on picking up nearby loops and running it through. You don't want to stick your yarn needle directly down through your work. You want to just kind of weave it in on the surface. I'm going to weave in through a couple stitches there. You kind of want to just zigzag around. Once you've finished weaving in your tail, just give your work just a little bit of a pull, because sometimes when you're weaving, you might pull this string too tight and end up cinching your work. So just kind of get your work to relax again. And then you can snip off your yarn tail right at the base where you finished weaving it in. And then you can do the same for your other tail, your starting tail. And there you have it. That is the Symsonia Earwarmer. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would love to hear your feedback on this tutorial. If you did enjoy, please make sure to also subscribe, because I do plan to put out more beginner-friendly content. I would love to hear what you would love to see next, so leave a comment on what stitch tutorial or what kind of pattern that you would love to see from me next. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.